Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Can I really want to be able to relate to who is here. If we could do something with, how do we get
Just roll it over so she can see it, like, put it next between Sue and Sandy.
Sorry about this, everybody, but I want to be able to relate to the people that are on Zoom. And we're having technical difficulties obviously this morning. So let's see. I'm not sure how this is going to work, but we'll figure it out somehow. Can we, yeah, you can stop there because I have my reading glasses on, so this is easy. Let me take my reading glasses off and see who's here, and then I'll put my reading glasses on so that I can see my notes and give a talk. Let's see. Suki, Jeremy, Vicky. Okay. Good morning, Mark, back there. Today I want to talk about spring, but I also really want us to stop for a moment and acknowledge what's happening in Ukraine. And what's happening in Ukraine allows us to have a window to what's happening everywhere. So I want us to consider how we relate to the suffering beings that seem like us and the suffering beings that don't seem like us, and extend our heartfelt wishes for peace and sanity in this world, and that may my efforts here to express the Dharma harmonize with efforts throughout the world to bring sanity and peace. Last Sunday was the March equinox for us in the northern hemisphere of the Earth. This is the spring equinox or vernal equinox. You know, every time I see that word, I remember when I was an undergraduate and I had been super busy and I was taking this class. The one class I took as an undergraduate that was a kind of no-brainer class. It was called Music for Our Times. And one of the assignments was to create a musical instrument, and I'm profoundly not musical. And I woke up in the middle of the night before the project was due, and I was like, what do I do? So I don't know where I found in the trash somewhere one of those boxes that have rollerballs in them, you know, with like a maze. And I took it apart and wrapped it in green and did all this stuff and called it. And then I had green on it and then I had black on it, and I called it Vernal Equinox in black. It was just a piece of trash. And I got an A on the So whenever I see vernal equinox, I think of me frantically coming up with this piece of trash and sticking stuff on it and turning it in. Anyway, vernal equinox. It's interesting, especially thinking about what Eileen was talking about last week, that we experience the change in season But we don't actually experience the orb of the whole of the earth changing in relationship to the sun, right? We don't experience that. But we do experience the change. We do experience that we are tilted more towards the sun, and that there's increasing daylight and warming temperatures. And as we know, in the southern hemisphere, is there a problem?
Just a second, I think it's because the microphone's turned on.
Okay. Can people hear me on Zoom? Is that a thumbs up? I can't see them.
Is it on the Yeti mic?
That would be why.
Right now.
Okay, can people hear me now? Yes. Could you hear me before?
Oh, well.
No. Meso. Okay. All right. Big summation. All right. It's the spring equinox. Okay. Sun, Earth tilted more towards the sun now, where we are, away in the southern hemisphere. So it's fall equinox down there. I wonder, if you live in Australia, do you say up there? Like, who says up and down? Like, in relationship to the Earth in the sky, why would there be any up? There's no up and down. I mean, why aren't they up and we're down? Anyway, okay, here we go. So, at both the spring and the fall equinox, the sun stands directly above the equator for a moment. And at that time, at that moment, day and night are of equal duration. Light and dark, dryness and moisture, warmth and coolness, they come into balance just for that moment, and then they change. So in Japanese Soto Zen, this time of balance between light and dark in the spring is honored with a week of remembrance and ceremonies that is called Higan, or O-Higan. O-Higan means O means great or honorific, or Higan-e. So I haven't researched the roots of Higan, but I suspect that it, along with other ways the spring equinox is celebrated around the world, is tied to and grounded in our experience of the change of the seasons, our dependence on the earth for food and shelter, on the sun for warmth, and likely later on in our human development on our agricultural activities. Higan must have been celebrated in Japan in some way long before Buddhism arrived from Korea and China. And as we know in ancient Western traditions, there's also an honoring through ritual and community gathering and ceremonies through various forms over the millennia to mark spring. In Japan, people return to family homes, go to the graves of their ancestors and clean and refresh them, make offerings and express gratitude and respect. And it's also customary to clean the family home altar and make offerings. So there's a week in which we can take the time to honor this shift. Many of us in a modern industrialized world can be very removed from the cycles of nature.
Our day-to-day lives are spent at computers inside, so much time. So I think it's good not only to celebrate the return of spring in our hearts and in our communities, but also to celebrate it in concrete ways outdoors. Go outside, walk in the sunshine or the fog, notice what is happening around us and in us, in what we usually call the natural world. Like, is there an unnatural world? It's nature after all. I think there's something about spring that stirs us, recalls us to the natural rhythms, to life itself. It is a time of renewal, a time to take a fresh look at our lives, a time to consider what seeds we want to plant and nurture in ourselves and in our world. I think particularly recently, we know we have been through the winter's months, a time in which much goes dormant. There is often a frost that kills, sometimes that which we cherish, deeply cherish. And a time when we must draw deeply on our resources to stay alive and stay well. But the winter is also a time when that which is new can begin to take shape. And it's true that spring is a lean time too, in its own way. The abundance and fruitfulness of what is to come has yet to arrive. And at the same time, we enjoy the sun or the fog. We see the beginnings of things. We taste freshness of green shoots with gratitude. We do the work of planting what we want to harvest later. It's a time to honor resilience and the mystery of continued growth. And it's true that there is nothing certain. Spring is unpredictable. Frost can come late. Rain can come in strong bursts. Climate change is changing the natural rhythms of our world. But if we know how to work with the land and the sky and adapt, and we maintain an awareness that we are all in this together, we can grow what needs to be grown. My parents had after my father retired, they had bought land in Napa many, many, many years ago. And when they retired, they planted a small vineyard. And they were really tied to, I became more aware, having never been aware of agricultural stuff much before. When the frost came, when the rain came, when the sun came, how things were going to be affected. You never, ever knew. So buds would come out and you'd be like, is it too early? Is there going to be a frost? If there's a frost, what do we do? But there is this sense of growth, this sense of newness, and this sense of working with these cycles, with this. We need to know what needs to be grown, what we want to grow. We need to know what's happening in our world and work with it. During this time, we can cultivate what the hope in us longs for. It's maybe not perfectly, maybe not on our own timetable, but we can participate in spring in a way that nourishes and delights and sustains us. We participate with spring. doing this requires attention, it requires patience and persistence and joy in the small things. It means working together in concert with all around us and focusing on what's most meaningful to us, most generative to all life. We know our practice is much more than sitting on a cushion. Our zazen takes place in all the moments of our day. So yes, formal zazen, sitting on a cushion in a chair, however you practice zazen in a very specific way, is the core, it's the touchstone, and it's our refuge. But without expression in our day-to-day lives, it becomes an isolated special event that only sends a trickle of the sustenance and wisdom and compassion that is possible into our daily lives. And it's also true that formal zazen cannot really become all that it is without expression in our day-to-day life. It's a two-way street. It goes both ways. When we care for the so-called objects of our lives, when we care for our time, when we care for our relationships, we care for our zazen. When we sit zazen, we touch the source that brings nourishment to our life and is expressed in our life. There is no difference. There isn't any difference. And yet, we take the time to sit and we care for the ordinary activities of our lives. It's like an interactive mandala. Just as the Sangha is a living mandala, each aspect is equal in its worthiness. In our practice, there is no ranking. There's no ranking of activities. There's no ranking of individuals. There is no ranking. This is really, really important to remember. Each of us is fully expressing our own lives, and each aspect of our day calls us to live it fully. Practice deeply, according to the needs of the situation with all beings. So when we kind of take that in and wrestle with that, we say, well, how? You know, I'm a pretty practical gal. How? How does this happen? Sit zazen, yes. But what is it that can help me do this in my daily life? And there's many ways. But one way we can do this that I want to talk about today is punctuating our day-to-day lives with short verses that return us to an awareness of what is happening. And that also shifts our center of attention from exclusive focus on ourselves to a broader awareness that is colored by gratitude. Many traditions have such practices. In Judaism, there is a traditional prayers for special occasions and ordinary day-to-day activities. When getting up in the morning, eating a snack, washing hands, seeing the sunset, everything. In monastic cultures, there are remembrances or prayers said before reading, washing, bathing, lots of activities. In a Zen monastery, there are altars at the bathroom, the baths, the kitchen, the shop, all to call us to remember what's real. In the wider Buddhist tradition, we have what we call Gathas, verses we say as we go about our lives. Again, these are for any activity, and you can make them up if you want. They encourage mindfulness. Some of you know I'm a little allergic to that word. And I'm allergic to that word because it can be like, I'm going to suck my life up into the top of my head and I'm going to observe everything. Mindfulness. I'm going to squish the messiness of my life. I'm going to stomp it down. I'm going to elevate myself up to some kind of arid place, and I'm going to be there. And that is not mindfulness. Mindfulness is mindfulness of connection, heartfulness, connection, awareness, one that has a spirit of gratitude, appreciation, stability, care woven through every aspect of it. The practice of gathas helps us with that. And it goes back well over 2,000 years. And like I said, the practice of using these verses is not exclusive to Buddhism by any means. The great teacher Thich Nhat Hanh wrote much about gathas. And I would encourage you to read some of what he has written. One of the things that struck me when I was looking at some of what he had written was that he was given a book of gathas when he was ordained as a monk. And I don't know whether they called it this or he called it this. He called it the Warrior's Manual of Strategy. The Warrior's Manual of Strategy. And we often don't associate the gentle practice of gathas or the Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh with warrior practice. Sometimes people think of him as just like so gentle, so nice, so fierce, so dedicated, so strong. So if we can't associate Thich Nhat Hanh with warrior practice, then we need to examine what we think a warrior is. Chogyam Trungpa wrote that in Tibetan, a warrior is pawo. Pawo. It means one who is brave. One who is brave. When we sustain ourselves and return to our connection with all beings, we have the basis of courage. Courage is very difficult when you feel like you're a very weak reed. Yeah. Isolated, alone, frightened. When we know our connection, we can see more clearly. We are aligned with what is most true. Most true about ourselves, most true about others. We can take delight in the simple things of our life and are nourished by them. This is what builds heart courage. And so often we become so busy we forget. We forget what we are doing, our environment, who we are. And then, tricky little mind that we have, we often get busier and busier trying to make up for what we believe we lack in a way that's familiar to us. To stop and say a verse, a prayer, a gatha, we cut through that which binds us to delusion and the weariness of busy, 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 or the sinking of apathy. Each time we take up such practices, we plant the seed of what we want to grow in this world. We experience ourselves as someone capable of planting seeds. This is equally important. What we want to grow, how we go about growing it, and knowing ourselves as someone who has the strength, the capacity, and the courage to plant those seeds and see them through. When we do this, we become spring. We and the world are refreshed, renewed, and Zazen comes alive in our lives. Practicing with a Gatha does not require any special knowledge or talent, just like Zazen doesn't require any special knowledge or talent. If you have the capacity to do this, memorizing them is really nice. You can write them down in a place where you can see it. You can use poetry. You can adapt one. You can make one up, maintaining the spirit of the Gatha. So in our bathroom at home, Shinshu and I have the bathing verse that is in the altar before one enters the baths at Tassajara. It says, "With all beings, I wash body and mind, free from dust, pure and shining within and without." It's possible they've changed the translation since we lived there. Yeah, but anyway, I love this one, so we keep it. We don't have to tell anybody else, right? "With all beings, I wash body and mind, free from dust, pure and shining within and without." So you can say that, something like that, to yourselves aloud. Now, you might not want to do that in the public restroom. You never know, washing your hands. "With all beings, I wash body and mind, pure and shining within and without." Yeah, you could do that. You can say it quietly to yourself or silently. You can also do a more structured practice in which, if there are 4 lines, you say the first line on an in-breath, the second line on an out-breath, the third line on an in-breath, and the fourth line on an out-breath. So you actually stop, take 2 breaths, breathing in, you say one part, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. Gathas can be much shorter than this, short, pithy reminders like "thank you," or "come home," or "look up and see with the eyes of Buddha." They can actually change into kind of images, if that's the way your mind works, or feelings. So I want to share with you some of them that come from Thich Nhat Hanh's tradition. Feel free to adapt them. So when turning on a light, forgetfulness is darkness, mindfulness is light. I bring awareness to shine upon all life. Forgetfulness is darkness, mindfulness is light. I bring awareness to shine upon all life. Taking the first step of the day. Walking on the earth is a miracle. Each mindful step reveals the wondrous Dharmakaya. Dharmakaya is the body of the Buddha. Walking on the earth is a miracle. Each mindful step reveals the wondrous Dharmakaya. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote this one. "I have arrived. I am home. In the here and in the now. I am solid. I am free. In the ultimate I dwell. I have arrived. I am home. In the here and in the now, I am solid and I am free. In the ultimate, I dwell. So I brought some other ones for you too. This is a really sappy one. Somebody said to me once about reading about technology, get the insulin. But I've so come to, appreciate this. Putting on my flip-flops, I dress my feet with grace. My toes are breathing while my ankles are smiling. Putting on my monastic robe, my happiness is alive. May my peace and joy bloom in the hearts of all beings I meet today. They have it also here in French, but since I don't read French. This is for picking up the garbage. Picking up the garbage, I try not to judge. I remember my past mistakes. Taking care of Mother Earth, I respect myself together with all beings. Picking up the garbage, I try not to judge. I remember my past mistakes. Taking care of Mother Earth, I respect myself together with all beings. Putting on my watch. Putting on my watch, I see that time is passing. Tick tock, tick tock. Each minute is precious. My life is precious. I will use it well. Here's another one I like. Sacred toilet paper. Coming from a tree, I see clearly the forest is with me. Sacred toilet paper coming from a tree, I see clearly the forest is with me. Stopping to let the sun shine on my face, I feel my grandmother enjoying its warmth. Seeing the presence of my ancestors, I know their strength and joy is also mine. Stopping to let the sun shine on my face, I feel my grandmother enjoying its warmth. Seeing the presence of my ancestors, I know their strength and joy is also mine. And finally, from this, my eyes reflected in the mirror, the eyes of my ancestors, a smile on my lips, a smile on their lips. The human doing stops and sees the ultimate. Be a human being is more than enough. My eyes reflected in the mirror, I see the eyes of my ancestors. A smile on my lips, a smile on their lips. The human doing stops and sees the ultimate. Be a human being. Being a human being is more than enough. So you can see that there are many aspects to this, but I want to share a couple more with you. I have been reading a book, which I'm going to spend a little time talking about another time. It's quite wonderful. It was recommended to me by a colleague who's a Tibetan Buddhist practitioner. It's not an academic book. The book is called My Grandfather's Blessings. Does anybody know this book? By Dr. Rachel Naomi Reming. Somebody knows her. Yeah, she wrote a book called Kitchen Table Wisdom. I'm enjoying it very much, and there are things in it that are very resonant with our practice, so I'd like to talk about it more. But what I'd like to mention today is she includes a prayer in it that she heard at a workshop conference. One of the participants mentioned this. It was a workshop for cardiologists, I think. Anyway, she's a physician. And she remembered that her grandfather used to say this last line. And the last line that I think is a Gatha is, "How filled with awe is this place, and we did not know it." How filled with awe is this place, and we did not know it. There are other lines in this prayer which are equally. How filled in awe is this place, and we did not know it, or we do not know it. Or we cannot know it, but we can also know it. We want to know it fully throughout our days. We want to realize it with all beings. We can ask, what is it? What is this place? Who is the one who can know it? How? And if we take up practices such as Gathas, it can guide us in that. There is another few lines that occurred to me that might be especially helpful when in difficult interpersonal situations, which none of us know anything about, right? When we are humbled by a mistake that we made, or when we're wrestling with self-criticism. They are the first lines of Hakuin Zenji's The Song of Zazen, and they go like this. Sentient beings are originally Buddhas, like ice and water. There is no water without ice. Sentient beings are originally Buddhas, like ice and water. There is no water without ice. Okay, so you're in a situation, you're like, or you're, Sentient beings are originally Buddhas. Like ice and water. There is no water without ice. Buddha, Buddha, Buddha all the way. Reciting gathas and remembering ourselves back to reality in all the ways that we can brings life to our lives and the lives of others. It's a blessing and an acknowledgement of all that we receive. In a way, it is the practice of spring. It does not refuse darkness. It does not deny anything. It does not pretend to be all chickies and rainbows and like those Easter pictures, that's all like flowers and pastels and little chicks and what else? Bunnies, yeah, bunnies. And that's spring is much more complicated than that. It's about growth and about the fruition of composting and it's a way of courage, really. It's a way of saying yes. It engages us in the world. It calls us to be who we are as we are. So I want to emphasize that we are all a part of a mandala practice, each in our own way. When we make the practice our own and come together as a community, we teach one another and we learn from one another and we support one another. I think it would be interesting to share gathas sometime that have the most meaning for each of us, because they'll be different and where we find them. So this is the practice of spring. as we enter a new season, having gone through a deep winter. And I hope that we can enjoy this practice together. Thank you.